Close this. Very good. Great. Fantastic. We are ready to start. Okay, we are live on YouTube, and that means that we can start with the class. Araceli, you have a question. Please tell me.
Yes, sorry, teacher. I was going to ask how can I rewatch the previous class because I didn't get the chance to be in the class and I want to catch up with everything that you said yesterday and the other classes. If you can help me with that, please.
Yeah, of course. Actually, we were missing you, Araceli. It's great that you have come.
Sorry, teacher. I was having a lot of work and things in my house, but I want to catch up with everything. I want to rewatch the classes.
Yeah, of course. No, it's totally fine, dear Araceli. Don't worry. So look at this. You can see my screen, right? So when you go to the WhatsApp group, if you open it and if you go to the description of the WhatsApp group, you're gonna find there the link to the YouTube channel. And if you open it, that is going to be the channel in which we are constantly uploading and of course streaming these classes. Okay. So as I said, you go to the WhatsApp group, you go to the group description, and you're gonna find this link to the YouTube channel in which all the videos have been uploaded. Okay, dear Araceli?
Thank you so much, teacher.
All right, my pleasure. Very good that you have come back. Great. Well, we're gonna start then. So, as I was mentioning, my plan for tonight's class is to discuss all the theoretical aspects of the third task of the speaking section. And well, let us start with that, okay? Here we are. Fantastic. Great. So, what can I tell you about this task? Okay. So, for Araceli as well to understand this part. Last class or in our previous classes throughout this week, we were discussing the second task. And in the second task, we saw that we had the opportunity to change now our approach to the questions, because you may remember the first question, right, that we saw last week. And in the first question of the speaking section, we were required to give our opinion about a subject. And we said that from the second task until the fourth one, that completely changes, because now we are not requested to give our opinion about the subjects that we are presented with. But now what we are requested to do is to summarize the materials that they give us. I repeat, to summarize the materials that they give us. So for this third task of the speaking section, dear students, what is going to happen is that we are going to receive two materials from ETS. First of all, we're going to receive a reading passage to read, of course, and then we're going to receive a lecture to listen to. You know what is a lecture, right? A lecture is a class, right? A class delivered by a professor from a university in which he, of course, discusses an academic subject. That is a lecture. And of course, in this case, you're going to listen to a recorded class through your headphones, right? Because in this case, in the speaking section, you have your headphones on, and therefore you're going to be able to listen to a lecture, as I say, a recorded lecture, for you to respond later on in the question. Now, what do you have to do with these materials? Give me a second. So as I say, the company ETS is going to give you a reading passage and it's going to give you a lecture. These are the two materials they give you to analyze. In the case of the reading passage, you have to read it, and in the case of the lecture, you have to listen to it. Now, what do you do with these materials? The only thing you have to do with the reading passage they are going to give you and with the lecture you're going to receive is to summarize both materials, both items. No more than that. I repeat, the only thing you have to do is to summarize the reading passage and to summarize as well the lecture they give you. Now, as you notice, here on my screen, I have the picture of a journalist. And as I told you before, the reason why I have this picture here is because I want you to think about this question as if you were taking the role of a journalist. I repeat, I want you to think about this question as if you were taking the role of a journalist. What I mean by this is, think about a journalist. What does journalist or what do journalists do in this case? Journalists normally, when they are covering, for example, they are covering a celebrity, right? They are trying to make a documentary about a celebrity. What do? They go, for example, to talk to this celebrity's family, and they go, for example, to her uncle, and they say, hey, what can you tell us about this celebrity. How was she when she was very young? And they receive information from this relative, and they take notes on that information, right? And later, for the sake of the documentary, they go to the artist or to the celebrity herself. They go and say, "Hey, what can you tell us about your career? How did you start in this business? How did you start in this particular career? What can you tell us about fame?" He receives information from this new source, right? Because if you notice, when he went to talk to this celebrity's family members, he was going to one source of information. But now when he moves to this celebrity herself, he is now discussing or listening and receiving information from a new source, right? It's a new source of information because now it's the celebrity herself who is giving details about her life. Now, what does the journalist do? The journalist takes that information, writes down on his notebook, right? As you can see in the picture, the journalist also has the notebook. And he later comes back to his office, takes this information, and he prepares a summary. That summary is going to be the final product he is going to deliver to his audience. That's all the job he does. And now notice, when he does this, when he prepares this summary of the information he received from the family, from the particular celebrity, could you give me a second? For some reason, I think that somebody forgot to turn off here a pen. Give me a second, please. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Well, I was mentioning that what is what the journalist does? The journalist simply takes that information, takes notes on that information, and he simply delivers a summary to his audience. That is what journalists do, if you think about it. Now, when journalists are correctly working, what they do is to prepare this summary without any change or interruption in the data or information they have received from these sources. Notice that. It's very important because when they are summarizing this, good journalists never change the information, never disrupt the information, never alter the information, because that would be somehow prejudicing and damaging the information, right? They try to be very objective and they simply summarize that information. They simplify it. They make all that information very short and very simple, and they deliver that information to your audience. In this case, dear students, that is exactly what you have to do. You have information from two different sources, from the reading passage and from the lecture in this case. And what you're going to do is to take notes on both information sources, from the reading and from the lecture, and then you're going to summarize both topics. And that summary that you prepare of the reading passage and the lecture is going to be your response. No more than that, as simple as that. You merely have to summarize the reading passage and to summarize as well the listening passage. That is what you have to do in the third task of the speaking section. Now, maybe you are wondering, what is this reading passage going to be about? That is the question. In this case, dear students, in the third task, the reading passage is going to be about academic subjects. Here we are starting to deal with academics, and get used to this because during the entire exam, from now on, everything is going to be about academics, okay? So what do I mean by academics? The reading passage can be related to any subject that is taught in a university. Think about, for example, all the subjects and careers that are taught in a university: medicine, biology, chemistry, I don't know, computer science, systems engineers, law. What about art, cinema, mathematics, a lot of engineering? I mean, think about that great variety. This variety of subjects represents that you are going to be facing in this third task of the speaking section, dear students, a reading passage that is going to be about one of those subjects. And your reading passage, you're going to be discussing on a specific topic from one of those subjects. I clarify myself. For example, if your passage turns out to be about biology, that means that your passage can be about, for example, Darwin's evolutionary theory, or it could be about, for example, the process of development in human beings, or it could be about eukaryotic cells, or it could be about or for example, imagine that your reading passage is related to the subject of chemistry. In that case, of course, your reading passage could be about the elements, right? The chemical elements. It could be about different types of substances, types of elements, types of blendings, mixes, things of that sort. Or for example, if your reading passage is related to mathematics, then of course, your reading passage is going to be about, I don't know, it could be about equations. It could be about, let's say, hyperbolic numbers. It could be about, sorry, the Cartesian plane. I mean, a lot of things, right? The point is that your reading passage is going to be about an academic subject. I think that is very clear, right? And this academic subject, as you can see, academic topic, is going to be a little bit difficult to understand, I can say beforehand, mostly because we are not normally used to read academic or scientific discussions in English. What we normally read in English is novels. We read, for example, I don't know, we read literature like poetry. We read as well things like, I don't know, well, let's say you read, I don't know, the fairy tales, or we read, I don't know, biographies, but we do not normally read scientific or academic discussion. Don't worry about it, because I'm going to give you some resources very soon for you to practice your reading with regard to this type of material. And apart from that, trust me that by practicing, you're going to get used to the grammar and to the syntax that authors use when writing this type of material, okay? But don't worry about it. By the way, the reading passage is going to be very short. As you can see here, this short passage about an academic subject is going to be from 80 to 100 words long. Very, very short, right? And you're going to have 45 seconds to read this passage. It's a very much sufficient time. We have experienced this with the students who were present in the second task, because the second task was very similar to this one. Now, when we come to the next part, okay, so when you have this 45 seconds, right, to read this passage about an academic subject, and your 45 seconds finish, then you're going to be able to listen. Another thing, as I told you, the audio recording in this case is going to be a lecture. What is this lecture going to be about? This lecture, that, as I told you, a lecture is basically a class that is recorded of a professor discussing an academic topic or an academic discussion, etc., etc. This lecture is going to be about the exact same topic you read about in the passage. That is to say, remember that here in the reading passage, you are going to be reading about an academic subject. For example, if you read about Darwin's evolutionary theory, then here, the professor in your lecture, when you listen to this, right after you read the passage, is going to be discussing the exact same topic. The professor is going to be a biology professor, and he is going to be discussing Darwin's evolutionary theory. What is he going to do? He is going to complement, listen very well to that, he's going to complement the reading passage you have read here with additional data, information, and he is going to offer some illustrations and examples for you to comprehend this matter further, okay? That is all he's going to do. And it's going to be very good for you because, as I said, you're going to polish your information about the topic they gave you here, and you're going to be able to receive the second information source to prepare your summary later on, okay? So after you listen to this professor, and by the way, it's not going to be a very long lecture, it's just going to be a lecture of 1.5 minutes, something like that. You're going to be able to prepare your response, okay? And here's how the timing works. But as I told you beforehand, your only task, dear students, is to summarize both materials with the notes you take on the reading passage and with the notes you take on the lecture you listen. The only work you have to do is to prepare a summary of both materials, right? Now, let me show you the timing. As you can see here, we have 45 seconds. Listen very well to that. We have 45 seconds for reading the passage, as I told you. And then the audio clip or the audio recording, in this case, the lecture, right? The class delivered by a professor on the academic subject is going to last for approximately 1 minute, 1.5 minutes, 1 minute and 45 seconds, something like that, okay? Then, after you finalize listening to this particular lecture, you're going to have 30 seconds to prepare a response. In these 30 seconds, you have to, as I say, summarize the reading passage with the notes you have taken, and also to summarize the lecture with the notes you have taken. That's the reason why, as I told you, notes are becoming very important from now on. It's a skill that we're going to polish and perfect very much, and that we are going to apply throughout the entire exam, okay? So you take your notes, you prepare your summary in these 30 seconds, as you can see, and then you have 60 seconds to respond. What is your response? Your response is simply the summary you have prepared, okay? Don't worry, of course, I have a template, I have a structure for you in order to serve as a guidance and, of course, as a structure and template for you to organize your summary, certainly. But don't worry, I'm going to share that very soon. Before I do that, let me show you this on the simulator for you to understand how this task is going to look like on the actual exam, okay? So please let me get into my simulator very rapidly, and I'm going to show you what I mean, okay? Let me open here, this part, here as well. Okay. Yeah, speaking number 3. Great. So, as you can see, dear students, sorry, the first thing you see when you start with the first task of the speaking section is this. This is basically a set of instructions, right? This explains what is going to happen in this task. It gives you the timing, etc., etc. Do you need to pay attention to this? Not really, because, well, you're taking these courses, you know what to do, right? Anyways, you press next, right? And then the next thing you're going to be seeing on your screen is this. As you can see, this is the passage that I was talking about. It's a very, very short passage. As you can see here, we have it. And as I told you, it's about an academic topic. In this case, the topic is principal negotiation. But of course, I think that because of the name, we can very much confidently deduce it's related to some sort of business subject or some sort of administration subject, right? Anyways, the point is that, as you can see here, dear students, you have the reading passage and you have 45 seconds to read this. For that matter, here you're going to have a chronometer, as you can see, as this one, right? But in the case of the actual exam, the chronometer is going to go backwards, that is to say 45, 44, 43, 42, and you have that time in order for you to read this passage. Now, as I told you before, if you finalize before the 45 seconds are over, my recommendation is please don't press this button next, because if you press next, you're going to go to the lecture, and by the way, you're not able to come back. As you can see, there is no such a button as back or previous. You just go next, but you never go back. So the idea is that if you finalize reading this passage before the 45 seconds, stay there, and with your piece of paper and pencil, start taking your notes and, of course, thinking about what summary you're going to offer of this reading passage, okay? In this case, about principal negotiation. Well, as I said, when the 45 seconds are over, the computer immediately takes you to the next part. What is the next part? Is this one, okay? Here you have. As you can see here, we have the lecture, okay? This is the lecture you're going to listen to. In this case, we're not going to listen because I have another illustration prepared for you, not this one. But anyways, the point is that, sorry, students, in this case, the lecture, as you can see here, I can reproduce it, right? It's not the case on the exam. On the exam, you are not able to reproduce the lecture. The only thing that happens is that the computer automatically reproduces the lecture, and you cannot pause it or repeat it. You are merely able to listen to this lecture once. You cannot listen to it twice. You cannot pause it, nothing like that, okay? So please have that in mind. Take your notes. That's the reason why we always encourage you to take notes, because taking notes is essential for us to remember the information we are listening to in this particular lecture, okay? So you listen to this, and when the lecture is over, as I told you, it's about 1 minute and 40 seconds, as you can see, the computer is going to take you immediately and directly to the next menu. What is the next menu? Is this. As you can see, here is where you prepare your response and where you also deliver your response, okay? As I say, everything is also automatic. A voice in your headphones, right, tells you, now that you have read and listened, please start preparing your response after the beep. And there is a sound like a beep, right? And then you start preparing your response. And there is a chronometer on your screen that tells you that you have 30 seconds going backwards, and then you start preparing your response, right? As I told you, in this 30 seconds, what you should be doing is to take your notes, and with those notes, prepare a summary of the reading passage and also of the lecture. Afterwards, you take that and, well, the voice, when the time is over, tells you, well, now that you have prepared your response, start delivering it after the beep. And then beep again in 60 seconds. And in these 60 seconds, you deliver your response. And as I say, everything is automatic. You don't press anything. The voice tells you when to start, when to finish, and you just have 60 seconds. Remember, it is not a good idea to talk farther than that. That is to say, to talk more than 60 seconds, because first of all, it's not even recorded. And secondly, well, why to bother yourself if you know that it's not useful, okay? There you are. This is the menu, and this is the interface you're going to be confronting on that day of the exam. Is there any question, dear students, with regard to the third task, with regard to the menu or to the interface of this part? Please tell me. Araceli, Roy, Abigail, is there any question with regard to this part? No questions? Okay, very good. Great, okay, so if there are no questions, let us go to some illustrations. Let me please go here, here, and here. And we're going to start with that, okay? Here I am. Well, let me show you this. And here we're going to have this illustration for you to, of course, understand this better, okay? Let's roll. And please go a little bit. Okay. Very good. Here we are. So I'm going to paste right now the reading passage to the chat box and also to the WhatsApp group for you to have it there and to read it with me. Okay. Anyways, I'm going to read this aloud so that you can listen. Okay. Here we have the passage. In this case, it's this one. What is mitosis? So I'm pasting it to the chat box. And I'm pasting it as well to the WhatsApp group. There's this one. There we are. There you have it. Great. Compose. Very good. So let us read this together, okay? If you agree, let's go. What is mitosis? In biology, the process called mitosis is a part of the cell cycle in which chromosomes are replicated and separated into two new nuclei. This is a process that only occurs in certain types of cells, called eukaryotic cells. Most animals undergo this type of mitosis, although the process can vary between one animal and the next. Errors sometimes occur during this process, which is how many forms of cancer come to be. These are typically caused by having too few or too many chromosomes in the duplicated cells. Some organisms also use mitosis as a form of reproduction. There you are. That is the passage. As I told you, very short, no more than 100 words. It's something very much manageable. Now, maybe you are finding this to be a little bit complex with regard to the terminology that is being used here and with regard to the grammar. Don't worry, it's common. As I told you, we are not used to read this type of material. We normally read novels, science fiction, biographies, and of course, the way that authors write that type of literature is totally different to this one, okay? Anyways, don't worry, we're practicing, okay? So here, as you can see, we have the reading passage about an academic subject, in this case, mitosis, right, from a biology class. Now, let me please give you the opportunity to listen to the lecture on the same topic. As I say, the professor is going to be discussing mitosis, is going to add some important information, and is going to give some examples for you to understand this topic further. My most sincere recommendation, please take your notes because it's very important for us to have those notes available to prepare the response later, okay? So please, let us listen to the professor discussing mitosis.
Now listen to a lecture on the same topic.
Okay, so mitosis. Many of you might be wondering how this applies in the real world. Take the example of a cut on your finger. Why doesn't the cut stay open forever? Well, because the cells in your finger undergo mitosis. The body uses this process to repair damage and replace dead cells. It's not always a fast process. The cut on your hand will usually take several days to heal completely. The process of mitosis is at its most rapid when we're in our infancy. It has to be this way. Human beings grow rapidly during this time, so they need a lot of new cells to replace the ones which die and help the baby boy or girl to grow. Other animal species, such as the dog, undergo this process even more rapidly. Ever noticed how a puppy the size of your hand is the size of a small horse 18 months later? Well, the process which enables this rapid transition is mitosis too. Another and very different example of mitosis is that of bacteria. Most bacteria are asexual by nature, that is, they do not require a partner to reproduce. They use mitosis in order to churn out exact copies of themselves. Some bacteria, such as the one called Salmonella, can reproduce once every 20 minutes.
There you are. Okay. As you could see, it's a lecture that is very short, 1 minute and 34 seconds at this opportunity, and it's not very much difficult to understand, at least with regard to, as I mentioned, its length. Now, maybe you were a little bit troubled by the terminology the professor used. As I say, don't worry, it's totally normal, okay? Now, what else can I tell you with regard to this particular part? What I can tell you is that, as you notice, the professor in this case complemented the information that we had here in the reading passage, and she also offered 2 examples of how mitosis actually works on the real world, right? She talked about how puppies and human babies grow up very rapidly through this cell process. And she also explained how, for example, a cut on our finger also heals and recovers very rapidly because of this process of multiplication or cell separation. Now that we have read and listened to this, what is our task is to summarize, right? To summarize these materials, not to give our opinion. Notice, because what I explicitly told you is that journalists, in order to avoid any negative and harmful work, what they do is to avoid any type of interference, change, and disruption of the material as they receive it. And that's the reason why good journalists never mention their opinions or are never prejudiced, right? What they do is to inform the objective truth as it has been presented to them, the facts. That is what you have to do, to present the facts that they have mentioned you, that they have informed you with, in this case, what the reading passage told you, what the listening passage told you, and don't mention your opinion. Don't say what you think, don't complement the information. And that is something actually very much beneficial. Why? Because maybe you were afraid, hey, but what happens if I am not a specialist on the area my reading passage is about? For example, imagine that you are studying computer science and your reading passage is about biology. So, well, what does computer science have to do with biology? Anything, right? So the idea is that maybe you'll say, well, what am I going to do? Don't worry, it's not a matter of concern. Why? Because as I say, you are never requested to say something about that topic. You're never requested to add information, to complement the information, or to make some sort of clarification, or to add your opinion, or to make some sort of commentary. No, what they are asking you to do is to summarize. And for that purpose, you don't need to know anything about the subject. The only thing you have to do is to say everything they told you about the subject, right? It's very simple, actually, if you think about it, and very much beneficial for us, because if we were requested to comment on things that we do not actually know something, of course, it would be too difficult, right? But in this case, no, they just want us to summarize, okay? So let us listen to my response. This is an illustration, and I'm gonna show you how I responded to this question, okay? So imagine that my 30 seconds of preparation have already happened. I have prepared my response, everything, and now it's time for me to respond, okay? So let us listen to my response and let's see how I respond. So remember, I'm not gonna give my opinion. I'm not going to say what I think. I'm not going to complement anything. I'm not going to add any external or any personal data. No, I'm just going to summarize what they told me, the reading passage and also the listening passage, the lecture. Let us listen to my response.
Okay, in the reading passage, we have been immersed into the topic of mitosis, which is a process by which eukaryotic cells are replicated and separated into 2 nuclei. On the other hand, in the listening passage, we observe some practical applications of this phenomenon in the real world. For example, when we have a cut in our fingers, the way that they heal or the way that the cut heals is by mitosis, and the cells are reparated and the damaged ones are simply eliminated, and that way we heal. This process is also very much efficient and rapid in our infancy because we need to grow up, and it is the same case for dogs because when they are puppies they can grow up super fastly into a completely large animal. Also, it happens in some bacteria which are asexual and do not need partners to reproduce, as for example Salmonella.
There you are. Okay. So as you noticed, dear students, what I did in this case in my response was to summarize the reading passage and to summarize as well the listening passage, right? I was using a structure, of course, you have not noticed it because it's the first time you listen, but in this new illustration that we're going to be having right now, I'm very much confident that you're going to notice what is structure and pattern I'm following in my response. And of course, don't worry because I'm going to be sharing that with you later for you to apply the same structure and pattern on your response, okay? So please give me a sec. Here we are with the new illustration. Okay, I'm gonna paste it in the chat box and also in the chat, in the WhatsApp group. There you have it here, the chat box, and also now the WhatsApp group. Okay, here it is. Nice. Well, let us go. Let us read this together. Let me read for you. Compassionate consumerism. Compassionate consumerism is a relatively new trend in the American retail market. In this type of consumerism, when individuals make a purchase, a portion of the money they pay is allocated to a charitable cause. Nowadays, individuals often look for ways to contribute to the betterment of humanity, but they don't always have the financial resources to do so. Compassionate consumerism appears to be a good middle ground. While critics feel it is only a marketing ploy aimed at appealing to people in their 20s and 30s, others applaud the effort. They argue that it is desirable for companies to sacrifice profits in order to help those in need. Very good. Now that we have read the passage, remember that you have 45 seconds for reading this passage. After you finalize with those 45 seconds, that as I recommended you, if you finalize before, stay there, prepare your summary with your notebook and your pencil. Then you're going to listen to a lecture, and in this case, we have this one.
Now, as the reading suggests, many companies have embraced the idea of compassionate consumerism over the past few years. Studies show that customers are generally supportive of such efforts, especially very young shoppers. Not only that, but companies make a lot of additional profits from this kind of compassionate marketing. Some companies even thrive off of it. Now, take ABC Shoes, for example. They're kind of like the pioneer of this type of consumerism. You know the shoes, right? Those flat, simple slip-on shoes which are based on a type of traditional Argentinian footwear called an alpargata. Anyway, ABC Shoes achieved a huge market share about 7 years ago with their one-for-one business model. Basically, if you buy a pair of ABC shoes, they donate another pair of shoes to an impoverished individual. While this program has cost ABC Shoes a lot of money to administer, they've also made so much profit that they've expanded to include not only shoes, but also eyewear and coffee. Speaking of coffee, another famous company that has adopted the compassionate consumerism model is Bob's Coffee. Now, the one-for-one model doesn't make much sense for a cup of coffee, but a portion of the cost of certain items is sometimes donated to various nonprofit organizations. Since Bob's deals closely with coffee bean farmers in South America, they have recently launched a campaign where 10% of all purchases are donated to preserving the South American rainforest. And, would you believe it, on the day they announced the campaign, there was a line out the door at Bob's Coffee right here on campus.
There you are. Sorry. Okay, so as you managed to listen, in this case, we were discussing compassionate consumerism. And what the professor did after we read this passage on compassionate consumerism was to offer some extra information and data. And then as we had the opportunity to listen in the past example, she started to offer some illustrations and examples for you to understand this topic further. That is very common. As I told you, they normally at the beginning add a little bit more of information, data, or they clarify something, and then they merely offer some illustrations and examples for you to clarify any type of hesitation, okay? It's as simple as that. It's very, very simple. Well, now that we have read and listened, it's time for us to respond. Let us listen to my response that I recorded, and imagine, as I told you, that the 30 seconds have been already spent by me, and well, I'm about to respond. Let us listen to how I did it.
In the reading passage, we have been immersed into the topic of compassionate consumerism, which is a phenomenon that happens when people buy things knowing that a portion of their payment will be allocated to a charitable fund. Likewise, in the listening passage, we have seen a study that confirms that this practice and method is very much supported by young shoppers, and that it also promotes and helps enterprises to get additional profits. For example, ABC Shoes was a pioneer in this specific practice. They made some sort of shoes called alpargata. They had a one-for-one business model in which they received a purchase and they also gave away another shoes to a poor person. You also have Bob's Coffee, which basically receive a purchase and they donate one portion of that to an ONG. They are launching right now a campaign to help the South American rainforests.
Very good. Okay, well, in this case, what did I do? I did exactly the same. I summarized the reading passage and I also summarized the lecture, right? And if you notice, I think that until this point, you have managed to observe there is a pattern in my responses. I was using some phrases at the beginning, one in the middle, and of course, the way I organized my response is also, I think, noticeable. So it's time for me to share that with you and to let you have the structure that I was using and that, of course, I would like you to imitate in your responses now and also tomorrow. Here we are with the structure. You can see it. It contains 4 different steps as before. And well, the first step basically consists in the following. In this step, dear students, as you can see, I have here an introductory phrase. I always repeated this phrase in my responses. It's in the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of, and I really like the wording of this sentence because it's somehow forcing you and directing you towards mentioning the central idea or the title of your reading passage, right? For example, in the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of compassionate consumerism. In the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of mitosis. And after you mention this phrase, here comes your summary of the reading passage. As I told you, the summary must be, of course, very brief, very much concise, and especially in this part, very much general and simplistic. It shouldn't be something with a lot of details and a lot of explanations. No, not at all. The idea is to offer a super brief and, as I say, simplistic, even simplistic summary of the reading passage, because the part of their response in which you should definitely spend more time, invest your resources, invest your concentration, and of course, in this particular activity, let's say your notes and of course your attention, it's the summary of the listening part. It is in the summary of the lecture where you should spend more time, where you should also deliver your best techniques to be more detailed, more specific, because as I say, the reading passage is merely for fulfilling with the outlines of the response and also in order to offer some background and some context to the response that we are giving, okay? So as I say, this particular summary of the reading passage, very brief. If you notice, in both of my responses, I always spend less time here and I was way more general and way more simplistic in my summary of the reading passage than in my summary of the lecture. Okay, so when you finalize your summary of the reading passage, for example, in the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of compassionate consumerism, that stands for a practice in which people purchase products conscious that what they are paying for is also going to be financially or economically donated to non-charitable funds. As you can see, it's a very much easy manner to summarize the topic, and I'm doing it right now, okay? So when you finalize this summary of the reading passage, you move on to the second step. And what is the second step all about? Simply, it's about a transition phrase and then your summary of the lecture. For example, in this case, likewise, in the listening passage, if you notice, this is always my transition phrase, right? When I finalize with the summary of the reading passage, I always go and throw out my transition phrase. Likewise, asimismo, in the listening passage, and here I start my summary of the lecture, right? In the listening passage, for example, we listened to a professor discussing the same topic of compassionate consumerism, and he added the information that although it has been demonstrated that people who are in their 20s and 30s indeed participate more in this type of practice, it is not for that reason something that should be considered harmful or disadvantageous for society, right? Because that is what the professor said at the beginning of his lecture. And then I start to mention the first lecture's point and second lecture's point. What I mean by this is normally the illustrations and the examples that professors give in order for you to understand and of course to clarify your doubts. As I told you, the idea is that you always mention those illustrations, those examples, of course, in a very simple and short manner. We just have 60 seconds, so we cannot spend a long time in everything. But yeah, I mean, you can have more freedom and liberty here to spend more time in this part of the exam, right? So here you mentioned, for example, likewise, the professor said that we have two examples of this particular practice. First, we have ABC shoes, right? And in this part, I am in the third step, right? Because I'm talking about the first illustration that the professor gave. The professor discussed ABC shoes. That is a company that produces Argentinian-based pair of shoes that is called Alpargata, and they offer the opportunity to have people purchasing and buying its products, and what they do is to donate one pair of shoes per every single shoes they sell, something like that, right? And after you finalize with that, you go with the second lecture's point, and in this case, you do simply your mentioning of the second point, right? Secondly, we listen to Bob's Coffee example, in which they are always prompt to donate a part of the money that they have gathered and that they have gotten because of their sales and because of their because of their sales and because of their production, and they decide to donate to different charitable funds. Especially right now, they are launching and initiating a campaign for helping the South American water supplies, right? Something like that. It's as simple as that. And as you can see, in no part of the response I'm giving my opinion. In no part of the response I'm giving any external information or data. No, limiting myself to summarizing the reading passage, summarizing the lecture, and no more than that. Is there any question with regard to the structure, dear students? Please tell me. Is there any question, dear Araceli, Roy, Abigail, with regard to this structure, how to respond? Please tell me.
No questions.
Okay. Yeah, Araceli? No questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Great. What about you, Roy? Any question about this third task of the speaking section?
No questions, teacher.
Okay. Thank you very much, dear Roy. Great. Well, now that we have finalized with this part, it's time for us to practice, okay? So I want you to please, right now, see what I have here for you. Well, let us practice this, okay? Let us go. So here, look at my screen. You have there a reading passage about an academic subject, in this case, Aboriginal people, okay? This, I guess, could be part of an anthropology class or something like that. Anyways, you know what to do. You have to read this, okay? So please, dear students, you are going to have 45 seconds for reading this passage, and I'm going to take control of that time here through my cell phone. So please, all of you, just give me a second. I'm looking for my chronometer. Great, here I am. So please, all of you can start reading this passage now. Okay, please let us start listening to a lecture on the same topic.
According to your textbook, the Aboriginal people are very diverse, and I would agree with that.
You can listen, right, dear students?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, let us go.
According to your textbook, the Aboriginal people are very diverse, and I would agree with that. However, there are certain beliefs that unite the groups, and in fact, allow them to identify themselves and others as members of the diverse Aboriginal societies. For one thing, unlike the anthropologists who believe that tribes arrived in eastern Australia from Tasmania about 40,000 years ago, the Aboriginal people believe that they have always been in Australia and that they have sprung from the land. Evidence for this resides in the oral history that has been recorded in stories and passed down for at least 50 generations. This history is referred to as the dreaming. The stories teach moral and spiritual values and provide each member of the group with an identity that reflects the landscape where the person's mother first becomes aware of the unborn baby, or, to put it in terms of the dreaming, where the spirit enters the mother's body. So, I am saying that the way that the Aboriginal people identify themselves and each other, even across groups, is by their membership in the oral history that they share.
Very good. So that would be. Okay, now, dear students, it's time for you to respond to this particular question. And before you do so, please, you have 30 seconds to prepare your response. So please let me assign them to you here in my chronometer. Great, so please, all of you can start preparing your response for this question now. Great. Okay, so, well, it's time for us to respond to the question. Please, dear Roy, you're going to delight us with your response in this case, okay? So please, you can start responding to the question now.
This article is about that Australia has so many different Aboriginal groups that differ each group by the 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 location and the resort where they establish their people. And about this, the professor says that there are two theories about where they come from. One is that they come from Tasmania, and other says that they always be in Australia. They didn't come for other country, and this becomes a legend that will tell by each one to their sons.
Okay, thank you very much, dear Roy. Fantastic. Let us continue with Abigail's response. Please, dear Abigail, you can start responding to this question now.
Okay. In the reading passage, we have been immersed into the topic of Aboriginal people, about inhabitants of Australia who have been identified by physical characteristics. And likewise, in the listening passage, they says that Aboriginal people are very diverse, and they come from Australia, firstly, and after that they disperse around the world. And the second lecture's point is about Identity. Each member of the group is identified by his oral history that they share.
Okay, thank you very much, dear Abigail. Very good. All right, thank you very much, guys. I think that the responses have been very good for being the first time we have practiced. And as I say, well, the idea is there. You have it. You got the idea, summarizing the reading, and also, of course, going for the lecture. And I think that your understanding has been pretty much accurate. Of course, maybe some details in the dreaming, especially that is the theory, or in this case, the belief that was discussed in this part. But anyways, don't worry. We're going to improve a lot, and you are actually going a very good way. Okay, so fantastic. We're going to stop here then with our class. And yeah, Abigail, I think that you had a question. Tell me. No questions?
No, teacher. No questions.
Okay, fantastic. Very good. So great. So please, I'm going to take your assistance, and please, dear students, help me with your kind responses to our daily poll. Okay. All right. I appreciate it very much. And now let us go for your names. Okay, so here we have Abigail Graciela.
Present.
Thank you very much. And finally, we have Roy Bryan.
Present.
Thank you very much. And we also had here Araceli, who was here present, but did not sadly participate today. Well, in the practice, I mean, but she was here. Anyways, she has present. Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, dear students, for your kind responses. Well, I'm going to be seeing you tomorrow in order to practice. So please have a wonderful night and see you very soon.
Thank you. Bye, teacher.
Thank you very much. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.